Okay, we've done a basic installation of cygwin. So I want to look at um, using some basic tools, some tools from the cygwin command line, and then also talk about um, navigating the cygwin and Windows worlds. Again, cygwin is a Unix or Linux or POSIX emulation system, kind of riding on top of the Windows operating system. So after the cygwin installation, I've got a cygwin icon on my desktop, as well as in my start menu. I can open up a cygwin 64 terminal from either location. So double clicking on the icon on my desktop opens up the basic cygwin window. First thing I need to do is actually increase the font size. It's a little too small for my eyes. So I can go to the menu, select text, and hit the select and change to a 12-point font and save that. Um, that makes the font size a little larger, and since I saved it, the next time I open up a cygwin command window, I'll have the same larger font. I can have two cygwin windows open at the same time or more than two. I can close them down just by typing exit, or just by hitting in the active window Control D, which is it's kind of Unix standard shortcut for end of file at a terminal. So I've got a cygwin window open here. Let me just type in pwd for print working directory. And you'll see that the cygwin window is open, and I'm currently at what's called my home directory. And in the Unix or Linux tradition, that's under /home/ and then the username. And then my username on this system is AR63. That's my Windows login name. It is possible to change that username. See the cygwin user's guide for information on how to do that. It's fairly easy. I can also change my home directory to another location, but right now I'm going to recommend just leaving it as /home/ username. You may want to change your username if your default username actually contains a space. That can cause uh, problems sometimes when you're working at the cygwin command window. Okay, so I'm in my home directory. This is where you'll do most of your work in cygwin, creating new files and new directories under your home directory on a standard Linux system. Actually, this directory is one of the few directories on which you have permissions to actually create new files and directories. One of the things we'll be interested in is, the mapping between cygwin file names and directory names or paths and the Windows equivalent. So the / directory, which is actually a valid directory in Linux or Windows, is also known as the root directory. So I can do a directory listing there, and I see these files. I can return back to my home directory by just typing cd at any time. Do an ls, and right now my home directory appears empty. The cygwin root directory actually, in the Windows world, that maps to the installation directory where you installed cygwin. So that was on my C drive, and then in the cygwin 64 directory, and then so here I see in the Windows File Explorer a set of directories and files, and then also in my root directory in the cygwin window, I see those same directories and files. I can pass an option to ls, which is the Unix command to get a directory listing. To get to get a full listing of file names, creation times, permissions, and then also the files of the sizes of several of these different files. So my home directory, again, that's /home/AR63. So that's going to be in Windows. It's going to be cygwin64, and then home, and then AR63. Now, you'll notice in the Windows File Explorer, when I navigate to that directory, I see several files that are present that don't appear in just a standard directory listing in my cygwin window. And the reason for that is that any file that starts with a period as the first character in the file name is actually considered to be a hidden file in the Unix world or Linux world, and then also in the cygwin world then. So if you'll see, all of these file names actually begin with a character, and they're actually configuration files. So this isn't security by any means. It's just that by convention, we start configuration files with a dot or period in the first character name, and then they don't clutter up a directory listing. I can use the -A option to actually see those files are present. Again, they're not at all hidden. I can access those files. For example, I can just take a look at the .bash rc file or bashric file just by catting it out, and display the contents of that file on the terminal. One handy trick for actually when I'm working in cygwin, and if I want to open up an Explorer in the same directory, I can just type cig start and then period. A dot or period represents my current directory. This will open up a file explorer in this current directory. Of course, in the Windows here, I can create a new folder. Let me just call it TMP and do an ls here, and I see that temp directory, so I can cd into that temp directory. Here I'll just over my cygwin window, I'll create a new file, test.txt, and I'll see that file then is listed over here in my file explorer. So again, the whole, in Linux or Unix systems, they don't really have the concept of different drives like we have in Windows. Everything is mounted under the same directory tree, this root directory tree. So how do we access our different Windows drives? Well, I can use the mount command to illustrate where my Windows drives appear in my cygwin directory tree, and it shows me here in the last 4 entries. I've got a C, a D, an O, and a U drive, and those appear in the cygwin directory tree as under my root directory, under a directory called cig drive, and then C for my D drive, for my C drive, D, O, and U for my other drives. You can also use the mount command to mount other Windows directories over certain cygwin locations. So I see that my user bin directory in the cygwin world is actually the same directory as the bin directory under my cygwin64 directory. So if I go there into the bin directory, I see a bunch of files. Here, I don't, if I go into the bin directory, I'll see those same files. I'll also see those same files under the user bin directory because of this mapping. So I can get to my O drive again by going cig drive /O, or course, in Windows File Explorer, go to my O drive there, which is a network drive that I have. And again, I see the same files and directories here. So then CD to get back to my home directory. I'll get back to that same location here in my File Explorer. So I'm back now in my home directory. So it's the basics of getting around between cygwin, the cygwin file system and the Windows file system. I guess another thing I should mention is there's a difference between line endings in text files, so this can be a bit of an issue. So for example, let me go into the temp directory, and then I'm going to use VI, which is a Unix text editor, to open up this file that I created earlier with the touch command. It's an empty file. And then let me just add some text here. Hello there, world. How are you? So just 3 lines of text here in this editor. So let me close the file. I can display it here under my cygwin command prompt. Now if I go into that directory and let me open this up with the standard notepad editor. It actually opened up on another display. But I see in Notepad, there's 3 lines of text all appear as a single line. That's because in Linux and Windows, they use different line endings for text files. In the Linux and Unix world, just a single new line character, which is actually present in the file, is used at the end of every line. Whereas in the Windows world, a carriage return and new line, 2 characters are used at the end of every text line. So the Windows Notepad editor here doesn't actually recognize the Unix line ending and doesn't show the contents of the file as I see it in the Windows world. Some editors, for example, if I open it in WordPad, that opened up in another window, another display, show it fine. And then I have yet another text editor in Windows, Programmer's Notepad. It actually shows the file is just like I want it to appear. One of the things about this Programmer's Notepad editor is down at the bottom I see this LF, indicating that the line endings are in line feeds. Just line feeds and not carriage return line feeds. Under the tools menu here, I can actually change the line endings from a Unix style, and Programmer's Notepad detected that automatically, to carriage return line feed. And then I note the change here. I have to save the file because now I've changed all of the line endings. In this case, it appears fine over my cygwin window. If I open it up in VI, it appears fine here as well. Some utilities, in particular, when we start writing bash scripts, bash will struggle with the carriage return new lines that you might have if you create a file using a Windows editor. You can get some strange errors. So it's best when you're working in the cygwin window to actually use a cygwin editor like VI or Emacs from within cygwin, so your line endings will be correct. Or if you use an alternative editor, make sure that you use You configure the editor so that it uses line endings appropriate for whatever operating system you're primarily going to use use that particular text file for. I know in Programmer's Notepad I can change the um, options. It's under Tools, and actually under the defaults. I can change my default line endings. Here it's under Windows, so that when I create a new file, under using Programmer's Notepad, the default line ending is carriage return new line. So just watch out for that. Otherwise, you'll get some strange errors. So when you're working with writing shell scripts in particular, a lot of tools are just kind of insensitive to the line ending. I don't think the C compiler, the C++ compiler actually cares about the line endings in your C source code, but I know that Bash does. Not sure about Python. Okay, so let me close this and get back to the cygwin window. So we've looked at just a couple of commands, cd, which changes directories. So actually I can use cd dot dot. Dot dot is shorthand notation for the parent directory of the current directory. So I was in the temp directory. I use cd dot dot and moved back up into my home directory. From here, if I do dot dot again, I move into the home directory. So just a cd by itself will always take me back to my home username directory, my home directory. Then that works a little different than the cd command in the DOS Windows world, which I believe just doesn't change directories, just displays the current directory path. One of the issues that you'll run into are, we've got a number of different commands that are available. These commands are all read or interpreted by a program called Bash that I'm using here. It's one of several shells that are available, but that's the default shell under cygwin, and so this bash program is responsible for reading the commands that I type and then executing them. So again, we've looked at cd, pwd, ls to get directory listings. I can also, one thing you should probably understand is that some commands are actually built into bash itself, and then some commands are actually external. For example, vi is an external command, and I can actually find out where vi is located by typing which, and it shows me that vi is actually located in the user bin directory. If I do an ls, which ls, it says the ls program is actually located. It's an external program that's located in the user bin directory. On the other hand, if I do a which cd, for example, it says which looks at a number of different directories which are in my path environment variable. It can't find a cd command, and that's because cd is actually a bash internal command. So it's executed by bash when I type cd at the command line. You can use the type command. It will show you whether a command is actually built in or not. Type ls. It says ls is actually hashed as user bin ls, and that's our clue that it's actually an external command. pwd is a shell built-in. There is actually an external version of pwd, but by default, when I type pwd, the shell built-in command will be executed. If I want to execute the external one, I have to type in the full path to it. In this case, they operate pretty similarly. One thing For help on any of the external commands, this is where we typically use the man pages. I can do man ls, for example, and get a lot of information about all the different options that are available for the ls command, and there are a number of them, or man vi. But if I do a man cd, I don't get a man page on it. It just says that that's actually recognized as a shell built-in, and so I don't get any additional help there. So instead of using the man pages for internal commands, I actually use the help command, which is built into bash. Help is a built-in. So if I do help cd, I'll see, I can scroll back up here to see the entire help that's available, and see the different options I have for executing the shell build-in. The same for pwd, which was also a shell build-in. At this point, actually, I was going to say I don't have a compiler yet, but I do have a compiler installed that's in my path. It's just not the cygwin compiler that we want to be using. It's picked this up from actually the Windows path. But in the next video, I'll show you how to install all of the cygwin development tools, a C compiler, C++ compiler, make, and so on. We'll also talk about updating our cygwin system using the cygwin setup utility. But that concludes this video.